Good morning. I'm Lene Uhlmann. I am the Director of Arts and Ideas at JCC Chicago. And I want to welcome you all this morning and thank you for watching the film with us. I am very excited today to introduce you to the filmmaker of the film. And so we have with us this morning, Lucille Carra. She's in Manhattan, and we welcome you. I'm envious that you're in Manhattan. It's one of my favorite cities. And Lucille, I have a lot of questions for you today. We're very excited to hear from you, your perspective on why the film, what inspired you to make the film. And I'm also interested in hearing, how has the film affected Iowa City today? You know, we're about 13 years from the opening of this film. And so I'm interested in that. And we are going to be a somewhat smaller group this morning. So at the end, I will invite anybody. You can put questions in the chat if you prefer. But if you prefer to talk to Lucille, she welcomes questions. And it's always fun to hear from the filmmakers. So let's begin. Lucille, what inspired the film?
Well, first, I want to thank you all for inviting the film and me to participate. As you said, the film's 13 years old, so it's nice that it does continue to have a life. And I'll tell you a little bit about the background. I was making a film called Dvorak and America. And as we know, Antonin Dvorak came to the United States, primarily to Manhattan, to write the New World Symphony. But he did spend a summer in Spillville, Iowa. And at that time, he visited the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. So going back to Chicago and going back to Iowa a few times to make this film, I became very intrigued with the area, and I met a budding writer and filmmaker named Gary McGee. And he said, will you make a film with me about this Frank Lloyd Wright hotel in Mason City, Iowa, which is totally dilapidated? And he told me the history of the hotel. And I said, okay, it sounds like an idea, but let me see what's interesting about this hotel. Well, first of all, I was shocked at the condition, but it was still standing. And the second thing was, I said, gee, what is it about this hotel that we could connect to other things to give it sort of a point of reference? And the hotel almost became a vector, because at the time Frank Lloyd Wright was building this hotel, he ran off with Mama Cheney. She left his wife. He was in the midst of going back and forth to Japan several times. And this the Park-Inn Hotel was actually the precursor to his famous Imperial Hotel in Japan. So seeing all those interconnections made it a very fascinating project for us. And I'm lucky that Gary went along with it, and we interviewed so many people in the town of Mason City, as well as internationally, and it became a film that's very local, but it's also very international, because all politics are local, and every building that's torn down is local, and it's political, and it's socioeconomic. So that's kind of what intrigued us to make the film.
So when you set out to make the film, then it was a film about the hotel, but the film is actually broader than that.
Yes. We started with the hotel, but it had so many broad implications. The fact that it was the precursor to the Imperial Hotel, which was also destroyed, but partially preserved. The fact that at the time he was doing this hotel, he had his big crack up and he left his wife for the other woman, and the tragedy happened with her and the people who were living in their house, the fire. So many things interconnected that it just became so big. And the fact that Walter Gropius knocked off the Park Inn for something he did a couple of years later. And because this hotel was in the Wasmuth prints in Berlin, had a ripple effect with the Bauhaus. So that's why it's a broader film than just the hotel.
But I think that it made it a richer film. I mean, I felt like the whole thing was fascinating to me. I never really thought about the Music Man and the connection to Mason City, Iowa, and and talking about kind of like the history of Mason City economically, so sociologically. I felt that really added to the film, and I'm sure that's why it was located. It was nominated for a Midwest Emmy. I'm sure that all that. I mean, that's really something. That really is something.
The best film from the Iowa Motion Picture Association. So yeah,
it's very exciting. Were you interested in Frank Lloyd Wright prior to making this movie?
Yes, I was, because of his relationship with Japan. That was my key to Frank Lloyd Wright. Had Frank Lloyd Wright not been an architect at all, he would have been remembered as a footnote as one of the greatest collectors of Japanese prints at that time in the early 20th century. So there was always a draw for me between Frank Lloyd Wright and Japan, because what I love about Frank Lloyd Wright is, as we say in the film, architects in that period, let's say 1898, 1900, would go to Paris to study Beaux-Arts, very Eurocentric. Frank Lloyd Wright rejected that. I don't know why he had the urge, but he started to get influenced by Japan. He was influenced by a lot of things, but he was interested by the art and architecture of Japan so thoroughly that he went back 3 times in the 1910s, once with his wife, once with Mrs. Cheney, and I think he went back with the second wife. So everybody had their turn in Japan. But in Japan, he's revered. And I used to work for a Japanese company, and the Imperial Hotel was on the Ginza, which is a bit, the Fifth Avenue of Japan. And as Bruce Brooks Pfeiffer says in our film, the air above the Imperial Hotel is worth so much money in real estate. So I was familiar with the new Imperial Hotel, and they have a Frank Lloyd Wright room. The bar, as you see in our film, has been reconstructed from the original bar. So I always go to Japan and go to that bar. There's a special drink that they make. They have great hamburgers, and anybody can go and really enjoy the original bar in the Imperial Hotel.
I mean, it's when you think about it, Mason City, Iowa is it's not New York. And yet the fact that they were able to raise the funds to be able to refurbish it. I mean, when you looked at the hotel in its, like, in the state that it was in before it was refurbished, it was incredible. Like, it's incredible that the foundation was able to look beyond, the state that it was in to what might be.
Yes, and I was looking at the film again last night, and I hadn't seen it for a while. And I was just astonished, because when we started making the film, and it took a long time to make, it was one of those films, one of those documentaries you start at a certain year and you follow the progress of something. Those documentaries take a few years to make. And when we started, the foundation wasn't even involved. So it was scary to think, how were they going to raise these funds? And as you see in the film, at one point, they put funds into Music Man Square. In retrospect, I like Music Man Square. I worked on Broadway. I worked in the theater. I like Meredith Willson. And I think that's a great place too. And they house all of his artifacts. But at the time, it was pretty scary because how would this Frank Lloyd Wright hotel come back? And it had such an unsavory history in the 70s because it was a drug den. Someone bought it and just used it as a flop house for drugs to go back and forth. So we also have that in the film. And the downfall of Mason City at the time was covered by Life magazine, Time magazine, and the Saturday Review. And Peter Schrag wrote a really great article on what happened to Main Street. And but it came back. And also in our film, you see other examples of prairie architecture in Mason City. So it's quite a gem. And I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did.
Do you
And
think that the fact that you were making a film about it helped?
no.
No.
Well, we were allowed free access to the park in that dilapidated state, but I don't think the film, it's maybe the idea that people were making a film about it helped, but I've never heard that it did. But I think it did in a cumulative way, and the fact that we have those television news bits that we have in the film, I think because it was always publicized, that helped. I think the whole thing and some newspaper articles about it. But it's really hard to get money, especially in those days to get funding.
Absolutely. I mean, when you made this film, so the film like came out in 2008, right?
Yeah.
It was just like, that was just at the beginning of the recession. It was,
yeah.
it was a tough time. So tell me, like, what does the hotel look like now? I mean, we've been through COVID. Do you know, I mean, you probably haven't seen it,
I
but
haven't.
is it faring well? Are they able to sustain it?
Post-COVID or during COVID, I don't know. I think it did as badly or as well as any other hotel. I did go online and see that you could make reservations for $115 a night.
Yes, I did too.
I don't know what goes on in Iowa as far as state funds helping hotels and workers and the arts. That's a very different state from New York. They may have gotten federal funds, and maybe those funds have not been diverted, and it is going to these places, but I don't know. We could find out, I guess.
I wondered about it. So I also went online to take a look and see, like, what would it cost if we were to go today? I see that they're offering breakfast through August. Breakfast comes with, with your reservation. And so I was pleased that it was open,
Yeah.
because a lot of the hotels, even in Chicago, really were not able to sustain the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Because I've been to Chicago many times and I love Chicago. Everyone from New York City loves Chicago, and we all say the same thing. If we had to move someplace else, it would be Chicago. I could live there. So it's a great place and I can't wait to go back. I noticed Patrick Meehan asked a question or made a comment. He's an architect who appeared in our film, and he has been back to the park, and so he might have more news on that.
Oh, I wonder, Patrick, do you know anything about it? Patrick says it looks great today and it's been well maintained after its sensitive restoration. It's definitely like a place that I want to go to. I hope that it has helped Mason City, Iowa to become a more sustainable city.
Yes, because as you could see in the film, they lost the cement plant. They lost a lot of their economy. in the 70s, and that's when it went downhill. The same as New York, we had Times Square and they had their area that was very similar. And I think tourism with Cedar Rock, which is the group of prairie homes and the Park Inn, and then you could go to the house in nearby, the Walter Residence, which is it's one of my favorite Frank Lloyd Wright houses. You could do a whole tour there, and it's not that far from Wisconsin, from Taliesin. So it can be done. And I think it's worthwhile. And plus you could see the Music Man Square and get a load of all the Meredith Willson stuff. Meredith Willson never goes away. I mean, the Music Man is always being revised. And when we were shooting this, there was a previous revival of Music Man, and now another one is coming back with Hugh Jackman, which was supposed to happen already, but COVID, put a stop to everything. Making this film, I thought about the destruction of a lot of things, but I never thought about a pandemic.
Who would have imagined what we're still kind of at. Hopefully we're at the tail end of it, but we're still kind of living through it. Who would have thought that? So tell us about your career. Like you're a documentary filmmaker, but I know that you've made film in Japan, and so tell us a little bit about your career, because I thought you made a very well-made film.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I could tell you a little bit about that, but first I wanted to give a shout out to Robert Westfield, who narrated our film, who's a writer, and he has a new book out called The Sightseers, and he lives in New York. It's about tourism in New York, and he did a wonderful job narrating. And we also used him to narrate a little piece in our Dvorak and America film. And I really like the tenor of his voice. He's from Virginia or West Virginia, and he gave it a very nice, casual reading. So I just started out loving film, even as a kid, and I went to NYU Film School. And one of my professors was Martin Scorsese at the time. And I went from there. I by chance, I started working for a Japanese film and theater company in New York City. And I had always wanted to work more in the archives or with, let's say, or with European film, which was my background. But I became very familiar with Japan over time. And it's not an easy nut to crack. It's a very difficult, strange culture, because we come from a European background, and it's easier now with anime, and a lot of kids love Japan. But when I started, it was very esoteric. But I began to like it. And my first film was called The Inland Sea. And it was based on a book by Donald Ritchie, who was the foremost Western writer on Japanese film. And he wrote a beautiful book about his experiences in this very rural, remote area of Japan, which is dotted with many islands. So that was my first film when I decided to go from the distribution side, which was so exciting to work in, to actually producing and directing. But I had always wanted to actually make films. So that's it. When I make these historical documentaries, it really inspires me, because I love archive work. I love digging into details, as I did with film history. So I just love the whole thing. I love combining the archival with beautiful landscapes. So I took it from there.
What are you working on now?
Now we are finishing a film on Glenn Gould, which should be done very soon. And it's really about his relationship with his producers as a musician, coming to New York from Canada and working at a very famous place called Columbia 30th Street Studios. And everything was recorded in this studio, all of the Leonard Bernstein, all of early jazz, A Kind of Blue, Miles Davis, all the classical music that we used to listen to on Columbia Masterworks was recorded there. And we have went through archives of photos, and we have so many pieces of film footage. And what really fascinated me was talking to Glenn Gould's producers, who were very elderly when we spoke to them. And the magic of recording, something like the Goldberg variations, or some of the Beethoven symphonies or concertos that he did with various conductors, including Leonard Bernstein, and how these old LPs from the 50s really live on. And of course, in keeping with the last Wright, Columbia 30th Street Studios was torn down. It was on 30th Street between 3rd Avenue and 2nd. And they put an apartment building up. So every film I make has this theme, like these things are torn down and we get to them at the last second to kind of preserve the history. So that's finished. That should be coming out, I don't know, at the end of the year.
Oh, we'll have to look for that.
Yes. And all his producers were products of the New York State or New York City school system. All his producers were older than he was. A fascinating group of people who probably learned electronics and engineering in the war, you know. So that's kind of an interesting point too.
You know, like I said, we'll look for it and
We'll look for it
to share it, you know.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Vicki, do you want to let?
Okay, off you go. I'm Glenn Robinson and my wife Vicki.
Hi.
We live in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and we are strong supporters of all of Frank Lloyd Wright activity. In fact, we've done 2 Frank Lloyd Wright tours. Obviously, the first was to Buffalo and to Falling Waters and so forth. And we always we rent a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and we always stay in the house while we're touring. And then the second trip we did was through Chicago and then on to Taliesin, Madison, Wisconsin, 2 Rivers, where we stayed in the Maclean's magazine, or sorry, it was a magazine anyway that was produced in 1938 as a house for everyday people, and that house was built in 2 Rivers. And we also enjoyed the home, which was very extravagant, of Johnson's Wax as well. Yeah. But we've really been encouraged. Now we're planning another tour, and Madison City is very much on the tour. And in fact, we're going to book at least 2 nights in the hotel. But there's lots of places on the way that we've identified that we want to participate in. In terms of your documentary, I was particularly amazed at all the film footage you had, the natural film footage, the street scenes, the cars, and then showing the gradual deterioration of the building itself. And a month ago, we had the tour of the new building, so we now know what it looks like today. But I had no idea it was in such bad shape. And your documentary certainly reinforces that, particularly with the college girls that were occupying it at the end. My God, it was terrible. But it really is it is wonderful, and it is amazing. The 25 million that was generated to restore it, and it's delightful. On another subject, Glenn Gould, being Canadian, we know all about Glenn Gould, and his piano is currently in our National Arts Centre in Ottawa. So if you ever wanted to come to Ottawa and see the piano, and I'm sure it could be arranged that somebody would play it, that might be an addition to your current documentary, but we will look forward to seeing it when it's produced.
I would just like to add that I'm not even sure, but a friend told us about this, your wonderful series of lectures at JCC Chicago, and these past 4 or 5 months. We've really enjoyed the presentations. We've got 2 more booked, I think, in the next week or 10 days, one on Monday, tomorrow. And so this has been another COVID silver lining. And thank you very, very much. We've really enjoyed it. And to be quite honest, we and the couple we travel with on these Frank Lloyd Wright odysseys, as we call them, none of us had ever heard of Mason City. So Mason City is right up there. It's right at the top of our list when we can travel again. We don't know when that will be, but we're already doing the research and planning to get going. So
Another bonus was
Great.
Music Man is one of our favorites, and we saw it when it was produced in Stratford, Ontario, probably about 20 years ago.
we didn't
And
know the connection.
and we are constantly talking about trouble in River City, and I had no idea that it was Mason City. And then the third element is Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper. We saw it in London when we were there, and one of our group is a Big Bopper fan, so that's also added to the list. So there's so many reasons to go to Mason City at the moment.
So thank you all for introducing us to something that we knew nothing about.
And
So
we've
that's
also
great.
shared this with our various friends here in Ottawa and in Toronto who have an interest in Frank Lloyd Wright, and they have also logged on to your presentations.
So thank you all.
I'm delighted that, you've joined us, and what I wanted to suggest to you is next time you come to Chicago, if you're looking to stay in a Frank Lloyd Wright property, Bach House.
Okay.
The Tawani Foundation is the conservator, and that is a jewel, like right on Lakeshore Drive. It's beautiful, like right there by the lake. So I wanted to mention that to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, are there any other questions this morning? I want to thank you so much, Lucille. Your film is, it's inspirational, really well made. Like, I wanted to learn more and more. And like I said, it's pushed me to want to go visit Mason City. It was also not on my radar screen. So, it's, at JCC, we do some travel programming, and we are looking forward to a time when people feel comfortable enough to travel, and to the opportunity to take people and to be able to experience all of the Frank Lloyd Wright properties that we've explored over this past year. It's really the silver lining behind COVID and this pandemic was that we got to meet people like Lucille and hear from her about what inspired her to make this film. Lucille, have a wonderful rest of your day. I can't wait till I can go to New York City. It's my favorite city to go visit. And if you ever come to Chicago, please let us know. And, one thing I am is a tour guide. That's something that I do as part of my job. So I'm happy to take any of you really around Chicago. And we'll look for the Glenn Gould film. We'll, and if you think about it, just shoot me a line to say that it's, that it's available. I'd really appreciate it. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your morning, and be well, stay safe.
Okay, and may I say one more thing? I really am delighted to have met the couple from Ontario, and we achieved the film's archival magnitude because of the Mason City Public Library and Terry Harrison, who was the archivist, and Art Fishbeck, who was also a local historian. It was just a fabulous contribution, and we can't thank them enough. And Joan Barron, our wonderful editor.
Well, thank you. Like I said, really enjoyed your film, and the feedback that I heard from people who had watched the film, also very positive. So everybody have a wonderful day. Be well.
Thank you for joining us. It was so nice to meet you, Lucille.
Nice to meet you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.